Everything we say until 2:30 will be on channel 2. Good afternoon. This is Brian from Timbercrest. It's 2:28, so we'll start our Timbercrest chat with Esther Hamer in just a couple of minutes. So stay tuned, and we'll be with you momentarily. So you can see me, but I don't like to see myself. Well, good afternoon. Again, it's 2:30. You're listening to the Timbercrest chat on channel 2 from the Timbercrest Chapel. This is Brian Daniels. I'm your Director of Program and Services and the host for Timbercrest chat. And today I'm talking with Esther Hamer, and Esther is sitting here in her nice Timbercrest Buddy Walk shirt, and I'm here wearing my Timbercrest sweater vest, so we're ready to get started. Before we do, though, just a couple of announcements to help you out and to make sure that you're up to speed with things. I wanted to let you know that if you get out in the corridors, if you're out where you may be around other people, be sure to wear your mask. It's a good thing to do, and when you go outside, you can take your mask off for a walk outside, but take one with you so that if you come up on a group of other people to chat with, you're encouraged to chat. I mean, we want everybody to still interact in that, but it's important that you keep your mask on while you're talking to people and maintain that social distancing that's so important to all this. Something that you will want to be aware of, I think, is that this weekend, tomorrow and Saturday, all staff at Timbercrest will be checked for the coronavirus. We're praying and hoping for no results, for all negative results. I've talked to staff at Swiss Village in Bern and at Heritage Point in Warren. Both of those places have about 100 more employees than we have, and they had no positive cases of coronavirus. So that was really good to hear. And so I'm hoping that we have the same result with our staff. The tests are tomorrow and Friday or Saturday, and the results should be in Monday or Tuesday of next week. We have bingo on channel 2 tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We also have tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 the grief support group, and want to encourage you to tune in for those two things. Chapel also will be aired at 8:15 right here on channel 2. So we're keeping things as busy as we possibly can. One last reminder, if you haven't signed up for a slushie yet, I want to encourage you to do that. There's a sign-up sheet for neighborhood homes residents in the foyer out where you pick up your groceries, where you leave things in campus mail. And if you live in the manor, you'll want to sign up. It's a fun thing. We'll deliver that tomorrow afternoon. We have raspberry and blueberry slushies that you can have, and they're nice. They come in a reusable bag. And what I mean by that is that the slushies will be served. They have a Ziploc at the top. You put a straw in there and you drink up your slushie, but you can reuse the bag. You can put orange juice in it and then put it in your freezer, and the next morning you'll let it sit out for a little bit and you'll have an orange juice slushie. Or if you have maybe you've got some at the bottom of a bottle of cranberry juice and you just can't finish it off, you can pour that into the slushie bag, stick it in the freezer, and the next day you'll have a nice fun slushie to drink. So those are being delivered tomorrow afternoon, so you want to be sure to sign up for that at your convenience. Only one other announcement is that there will be a Timberline next Tuesday. There aren't a lot of events going on. We are still waiting word on fireworks. A couple people have said, the fireworks have been moved from the university campus over to the high school campus. And a couple people have said, can we see them from Timbercrest? I don't really know. I left word with the town to see where exactly they were going to be shooting the fireworks off from. I suspect it's near the new football field that's there, because people are able to go and park and watch them from there. However, I haven't heard back for sure. And whether or not you'll be able to see them from here, certainly you'll be able to see the highest ones, but I don't know about others. So, but hopefully that information will be with you in the Timberline also. So that comes out next Tuesday. Well, that's enough announcements and stuff like that. I'm very glad to have with me Esther Hamer. Esther and I, she's wearing her Buddy Walk shirt. One year we were buddies on the Buddy Walk, and we aren't able to do the Buddy Walk this year, unfortunately, but I can't wait till we have the opportunity to do that again sometime. Esther, I know you, and a lot of people here know you, but I always tell everybody, all the guests here, that there are a lot of people who move into Timbercrest. There's a lot of new people, and there are people likely here who may be listening who don't know you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? Do you have brothers and sisters? Did you have a favorite dog? Those types of things.
I was born in Hagerstown, Indiana. I have two siblings. My younger sister, Dorothy, unfortunately died about 12 years ago of pancreatic cancer. Mm. My older sister, who is 5 years older than I am, well, actually 3 years older than I am, she is still living.
In Hagerstown still?
No, she lives in the Huntington area.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
I graduated from Hagerstown High School and then came to Manchester College. It was then, now university. And after I got my bachelor's degree at Manchester, I went to the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. Though I had had one meeting with John Hamer at Manchester University, we never dated here.
No kidding.
And I didn't know that he had gone to Case Western Reserve Medical School, and he didn't know that I had applied for the School of Nursing. But it was there that we started dating.
Boy, I can hear the violins playing already. How romantic. That's pretty fun.
Well, actually, I had two majors at Manchester. I was a biology major because I knew I wanted to go on to the School of Nursing, and I was an applied music major.
Nice.
So I played both piano and I played violin in the String Symphony and in the Manchester Symphony Orchestra.
Isn't that wonderful? That's great. That's really something. And did you have children?
We have two daughters. Our older daughter, Harriet, is an anesthesiologist at Memorial Hospital in South Bend, Indiana. Our younger daughter, Krista, works for Bank of New York Mellon, but she works in Frankfurt, Germany.
Wow.
She actually had an interesting experience last July. The bank in Frankfurt sent her to Poland to teach people in the Bank of New York Mellon in Wrocław, Poland, how to do the job that she does at the Bank of New York Mellon in Frankfurt, Germany. And she really enjoyed that time teaching them and learning and visiting many places while she was in Wrocław, Poland.
Nice, very nice. So do you get to see them very often then?
Well, John and I used to go and visit her and her husband in Germany, But at this point, I mean, she has been coming our way.
Right,
And
right.
she comes usually once a year, occasionally twice a year. Of course, that's not possible now.
No, that's right. That's right. Well, that's a good lead in to one of the main things that I wanted us to talk about today. Of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Some of us hope we're closer to the end than we probably are. But you and John had an opportunity to actually kind of avert a pandemic while you were serving in Nigeria. First of all, just again, so people who may not know you, may not be as familiar, what took you to Nigeria in the first place?
Well, when John finished his internship for 1 year after he had completed medical school, he would have been drafted for the Korean War. And he didn't want to do that. He said he would rather serve people than to shoot people. So even though we had given some thought to going to work overseas for the Church of the Brethren, we probably would not have gone quite that soon, but we said we would go then.
Mm-hmm.
And so we left for Nigeria in 1953.
How long were you there then?
Our first tour was 3 years, and then we were home for a couple of years. And because he wanted more experience in surgery, we were at Ball Memorial Hospital in Muncie, Indiana, and he worked with a surgeon, and he let John scrub in on all of his surgeries. And while he was there, he said, if I'm going to do more surgery, I need somebody who can do anesthesia. So they had a school of nursing and a school for a nurse anesthetist. So I enrolled in the school for a nurse anesthetist.
Wow.
There at Ball Memorial Hospital while he did more surgery.
Wonderful.
And then we returned to Nigeria for 4 more years. And then when we came back the second time, he went to the University of Illinois for 2 years to take a residency in pediatrics. And it was there that they were doing a lot of work with viruses. And he learned a lot about viruses while he was there. And then we returned to Nigeria again for our third tour. And that was 1965 to 1969. And it's while we were there that we had this first patient that came down with Lassa fever.
Sure. Wonderful. I mean, that's good. It's not wonderful, the fever part, but I know I've read the story. I read the book Fever that features John, and recently in Messenger magazine, there was information in there about your mission and your work there, and particularly dealing with the Lassa fever. For those who may not have read it, or those, believe it or not, some people don't remember things very long here at Timbercrest. What sorts of, tell us a little bit about that, how you first detected it, and what your role and what John's role was in first detecting it and then preventing it.
Well, at that time, we had another nurse on our team at Lassa Hospital. John was the only doctor, and I had at one time been the only nurse, but there was this nurse who was 65 years old. Her name was Laura Wine, and she had always wanted to do overseas work for the Church of the Brethren. But because she had tested positive for TB, they wouldn't allow her to go. But when she retired as a school nurse from Oak Park, Illinois schools, and she also had been the night supervisor at the Bethany Hospital, which was the Church of the Brethren hospital in Chicago. They said, well, she seemed very well, so they let her come to Nigeria. So on Sunday morning, she had gone to the hospital as she always did, and she had delivered a baby. And then she went to church as she and we always did. On Sunday noon, we always had asked her to come to our house to eat the noon meal so that she wouldn't have to eat her noon meal at home alone. And as we were eating, someone came from the hospital and said, there is a lady delivering on the road, and would she go and help this lady who needed help with her delivery? She said, I don't feel like doing that. And I said, well, I would go and do that. And I did. By the time I had helped the lady and we had taken her to the hospital and I came back home, Laura had gone back home. The next morning, we had what we called shortwave radio between stations, and she always did that for the Lassa station. And she came out to the hospital to do that. And after that, she said, I don't feel like staying and working today. I want to go back home. After John had finished his rounds at the hospital, he stopped at her house and examined her and put her on medicine for malaria, because usually if people got ill, that was the first thing you thought about. Sure. Was that they probably have malaria. Well, she didn't respond to that. And so after a while, John decided, well, he should do a white blood count on her. We did have staff at the hospital who could do simple things like examining stools and urines, but they weren't experienced enough to do a blood count. So John did the blood count, and it was below normal. And that meant that it was not a bacterial infection. I mean, if you have a bacterial infection, your blood count, white count, is high. So, and in the meantime, she was developing a red rash on her neck, and she started getting some ulcerated areas on the inside of her mouth. She also was becoming more lethargic. When I would take her mail over to her, she wasn't really interested in opening her mail. And we decided that we would need to move her to the hospital from her home. We had only one bedroom there for missionary staff at the hospital, but we moved her there so we could give her some oxygen. And we stayed with her, one of us, or we had some BVS workers, that's Brethren Volunteer Service Workers, who could sit with her during the night. And we decided, though, that we wouldn't have enough oxygen to last forever. Sure. And that we should transfer her to an SIM hospital in Jos, which was 50 miles away. So the next morning, John got on the shortwave radio and he asked if it would be possible for the SIM to send a plane out so that we could transfer her by plane to this hospital in Jos, Nigeria. They said, well, fortunately, they were bringing a dentist from the United States out to our area. And when they brought him out, we could load Laura in the plane and we could come into the Jos hospital. So that's what we agreed on. Well, I went home and I went to Laura's house too, and I started collecting all the things that we might need. I mean, we didn't know if she would stay there or if we might be needing to go back to the United States. So I had to collect her passport and my passport. John did not intend to go along with us because he was the only doctor at Lassa Hospital. But I said to myself, he needs to go too. I didn't tell him, but I got his passport and I had to get a bag of money. We did not have any checking accounts in that system. Sure. In the banking system. We had only hard coins and bills that we could carry in money bags. And I thought, I'll get one change of clothes for each of us. And I got a change of clothes for Laura. And then the next morning we traveled 50 miles to an airstrip where the plane would be coming. And just as we were beginning to load Laura in the Land Rover in which we were going to travel, she started convulsing. And so we got her loaded though, and we continued with that oxygen on her. And I thought myself, she's not breathing very well. And I thought, I wonder if she's going to have some cardiac episode. And I kept my thumb on her pulse, or my finger on her pulse, all the way. But the plane arrived, and because it was just a two-seater plane, really, we loaded Laura in the front seat beside the pilot, and John and I sort of crouched back behind Laura, but still I could keep my finger on her pulse to keep checking things.
Sure, sure.
So we went in, and we were admitted to the hospital. I mean, she was admitted to the hospital there. And of course, when you go to another hospital, that doctor is in charge, and their nurses would ordinarily be the ones who would be caring for her. But they said they had a shortage of nursing staff, and would I be willing to take 1 8-hour shift because she needed a private duty nursing all around 24 hours. And I said I would. Well, John and the other nurse, they rather compared notes, and the other doctor started doing some testing and treatment. And John told the other doctor he thought she might have some viral disease. He had actually checked his medical books and other books that he had had, and he started, before we left, he read about Marburg fever and other fevers, but he didn't find anything that was exactly a disease that had the same symptoms that she seemed to have. So he thought this may be a new viral disease. Well, actually, we got there on Saturday morning, and we actually asked her if she would like an anointing service. And so we had one of the Church of the Brethren ministers come and do an anointing service for her. Sure. Yet Sunday morning, but she died later Sunday night. And John said to the other doctor, I would think we should do an autopsy. And the other doctor said, oh, that's really a lot of red tape here. I don't think we can do that. And John said, well, at least we should draw some blood. And the other doctor agreed to that. So they each drew 2 syringes full of blood, and they put those in the freezer. And we tried then to preserve those so that we could send them to the United States. And then John and I and Laura, with another pilot, we flew the body back to Garkita, which was where another hospital was in the Church of the Brethren area. And the autopsy was done there. And those specimens were also sent to the United States. And when within 2 weeks, one of the other nurses who had helped Laura for an 8-hour shift, she became very ill and seemed to have some of the same symptoms that Laura had.
Yeah.
And she died. And actually, she had been out in her rose garden before she came on duty, and she had pricked her finger with a thorn on the rose bush. And, you know, we were always taught in our school of nursing that you don't know for sure what the diagnosis is. Even if the doctor writes certain impressions or what he or she thinks is the diagnosis, they may not have it all correct, or they may not have it the right diagnosis. So we were always taught to take every precaution possible. This was in the era before you wore gloves for everything.
Right.
So when I thought she needed mouth care, which she did, I used tongue blades and a long swab to swab out her throat. The other nurse, she had taken gauze and just wrapped around her finger and put her fingers in her mouth. And she's the one who came down with the illness and died within 2 weeks. So it seemed like there was a port of entry if you had an opening in your skin and you contacted the fluids in the other person's body.
Right.
And
so it was as simple as through that thorn prick, and then being in contact with the sores in her mouth, that's how she got the virus. Just that simple.
That's what we think.
Wow.
And then the other third nurse who did the other 8-hour shift, in a short time, she became ill also. And then they decided that hospital, they would send this nurse to the States. And so they got a flight for her, and she was admitted to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York.
Mhm.
And no one knows why. I mean, she just was given simple therapeutic, care. There was no special medicine known at that time, but she did recover. Nobody knows why. Well, the doctor then at that hospital later had done an autopsy on another patient, and she accidentally sliced her finger while she was doing the autopsy, and she also came down with the disease and died.
Mm.
So anyway, the research the samples that we had sent to the United States with this nurse who went to the United States, some of the samples went to the arbovirus unit at Yale University, and some went to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, down in Atlanta, Georgia. And the CDC had prepared a place to look for germs and other things that the astronauts might bring back when they had gone to the moon. Well, they didn't seem to bring any germs back, but the system was still there.
Right.
So actually, Lassa virus was one of the first ones they studied and worked on in the CDC. Well, as the research went on at Yale Arbovirus at Yale University, the doctor who was doing the research there, he became ill. And so they asked for the nurse who had recovered, who had gone to Columbia Presbyterian, if she would be willing to give some of her plasma, and they could give plasma from her body directly to this doctor who was doing the research at Yale University. And so they did, and he recovered.
So her antibodies then impacted the virus in his body.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting?
That was very interesting. But the other thing was that there was another person doing research in a totally different lab at Yale University, and he became ill and he died. Well, then that was pretty scary, because
Sure.
he certainly hadn't had really any direct contact with this virus while while they were doing the research there. And nobody knows exactly how he contacted that. But anyway, when that happened, Yale said, we're not doing any more research here. And so they sent all the samples and everything down to the CDC. However, before that had happened, they actually had discovered that this was a virus there at Yale. And they said that it was a new virus, and it was named Lassa fever. They always name diseases for the place where the first index person comes from. That's
Sure.
the way they name diseases. So it's called Lassa fever.
Well, I always wondered why John didn't name it after you, but that's, of course, that's very interesting. So did you end up going back to Nigeria, and did you find more cases of the Lassa fever there?
We did not go back to Nigeria. I mean, when we went home then, we had terminated our work there. But they sent other researchers from the CDC to the University of Ibadan in their laboratories and in the medical school there. And they did further research. Especially, they were interested in wondering who is the carrier of this virus and how do people become infected with it. And they did several years before they discovered that it was a wild rat.
No kidding.
The name of the rat is Mastomyces natalensis. And in the rainy season, the rats are running around, but in the dry season, when the people burn off all the grass and everything so they can get the land ready for the next planting season, those rats all try to get ahead of the fire, and people out there try to catch them. And I mean, they do eat rat meat, but they also will take them and pick them up by the tails when they're trying to kill them. And then the rats will pass urine, and it's that urine probably that if a person has Yeah. Now, when Laura did that delivery on Sunday morning, probably that person did have, the virus. She was a carrier. She didn't actually have the disease. But, then, as I told you before, we didn't wear gloves for everything.
Right.
Now, John and I, we did wear gloves when we did deliveries. But the British system was that you didn't have to wear gloves for deliveries even.
Right.
And Laura thought, if the British people don't have to wear gloves, I probably don't have to either.
Right.
So she hadn't been wearing gloves for that delivery. And she probably somehow came in contact with some liquids from that other patient, the lady who was delivering the baby. And that's how she contacted the disease.
Wow. Now, you may not know this, but the question comes to my mind. Did anybody ever follow up with that mother or with the child? Did they ever develop symptoms of it, or?
Well, actually, they did send people out. They even came to Lhasa, and they went to a lot of other places. And, they drew blood samples and they did testing on people. And there was nobody else in Lhasa that was found. I think this lady came from some other out village. Mm-hmm. And I'm not exactly sure exactly what they found about her and her family. I'm not quite sure about that. But anyway, that was helpful in helping them to discover, whether other people might have had the disease. Probably they did in the past, but, they died and nobody knew what they died of.
Right, right. That's really, really very interesting. As I said, and of course I read it in the Messenger, or in Messenger. I get in trouble with the brethren folks when I call it the Messenger, but I read it in Messenger, and I don't really get in trouble, by the way. But it's really good to hear your telling of the story, though, and the account of it. I think that's marvelous.
I should say that there is a treatment now for Lassa fever. The name is ribavirin. And if you can get that medicine to a patient after you are pretty sure that this is the diagnosis, and if the patient receives that within 2 or 3 days, they probably will recover.
Do you know if, are there still cases of Lassa fever that develop?
There are. And in fact, there was an email not too long ago that said there was a new outbreak of Lassa fever in Nigeria. But even between then and now, there have been other outbreaks other places and in other countries in West Africa particularly. There have been a few cases here in the United States, probably people who had traveled to Nigeria, or a person from Nigeria who had come to visit somebody here in the United States, and they were a carrier and brought the disease over.
Isn't that's just really interesting. So I really appreciate that. And it does. I mean, your story underscores again something that we're all experiencing here. Most of us aren't wearing gloves, but the importance of taking precautions like wearing our masks or keeping the distance. We know that those are effective things. It sounds like with the Lassa fever, the difference was gloves. Or could have been a simple thing like wearing gloves. So we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, you will, for those of you who have the Messenger, on the next page, our daughter Harriet, who is the anesthesiologist, she's written a comparison and of the difference between Lassa fever and COVID-19. And you may find that interesting too.
Good, excellent. So just to wrap this up a little bit, you and John came back in 1969 back to the United States, and then you moved to Timbercrest.
Yes, that's right.
In 1969.
Yeah,
no, I'm just kidding. What did you do when you came back?
Well, actually, when we came back. Well, before I say that, let me say this. When in 1969, when this occurred, the author of the book, there is a book named Fever.
Right, that's where I read the story the first time.
Right, and the author of that book, he was actually in Nigeria at that time, and he happened to pick up a New York Times paper, and he read the headlines about this new discovery. And he said, when I get back to the United States, I need to visit these people and write a book about this.
Is that interesting?
So that's how the book was written.
What do you know? I believe that book is in our Timbercrest library.
I think it used to be, at least. I
Yeah,
haven't
that's
checked
right.
recently. Yeah, right. And so you asked what we did. Well, when we came back, we settled in up in LaGrange County first. And John practiced medicine with a group up there for about a year and a half. But he really wanted to get into a center where there was more continuing medical education, since he'd been away from that type of experience for quite a while. So a Lutheran physician in Fort Wayne wanted to sell his practice. And so John bought his practice and we moved to Fort Wayne. And he was in private family practice for 20 years in Fort Wayne. And then after that, he went to the school. It was called the School for People Who Have Physical and Mental Handicaps. And he worked there for another 10 years. And I wanted to be at home with our children more, because when we were in Nigeria, they were 500 miles away from us in boarding school.
Oh, my.
And so I wanted to be more involved in their activities. I did work occasionally in the office to substitute for one of his nurses.
Sure. What was I going to say? So then you retired, you moved to Timbercrest. Of course, it was great to know John. I mean, I was glad I got to know him while he was still here, and I'm glad you're still around too. It's about time to wrap up. I've been asking all of our guests on the Timbercrest chat every week or every time if they have a word of encouragement for the Timbercrest family. The pandemic has hit us primarily in the areas of isolation, and a lot of people are experiencing loneliness and some signs of depression. And just this week, several people have come and talked to me about just their deep worry about the things that are going on. And so I've been asking our guests if they have a word of encouragement that might just brighten the day of somebody that's listening today. Do you have anything like that?
Well, I would encourage people to, if they're able, to get out and at least walk around. At least if you see other people's faces and you wave to them, or, say a word or something, it does make things easier sometimes. For those people who like to read, it's a wonderful time to do a lot of reading. And of course, now that we're able to go outside, you can go out and, attend some of those activities. And especially now that family are able to visit, if you have family who are close enough can come and visit you, that's another wonderful opportunity.
Absolutely. That's good. So, well, thank you very much, Esther. I really appreciate that. I appreciate your time and your willingness to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And this ends our Timbercrest chat for today. With the new system we're using to record this message, I'm going to try to see if I can't get it loaded onto the Timbercrest Facebook page so we can share it with people outside the Timbercrest family, or people who haven't yet been or may not have been able to listen right now. So if it is, I'll let you know, and you can share it with other people then. Otherwise, this ends our Timbercrest chat. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll talk to you again later. Bye.